fight and beat Russia in a third world war, Britain's top general warns. It was only about a month ago that George Soros himself said the conflict between Ukraine and Russia could lead to a third world war. In Russia, they're calling it World War III because NATO is basically supplying arms and intelligence to Ukraine in their war with Russia, so we're involved. But now, things have escalated rather dramatically. Following sanctions placed on Russia, Lithuania has reportedly blocked key resources to Kaliningrad, an exclave of Russia surrounded by NATO member states. Russia is calling the blockade illegal and threatening retaliation. If conflict erupts between Lithuania and Russia, as a NATO member state, the U.S. and other NATO countries are forced to intervene, and thus, my friends, we may find ourselves in legitimately World War III. It's hard to know exactly when a major historical conflict starts when you are living in it. We are surrounded by conflict and war and historical moments. The question is, will those moments escalate into something that history will never forget? You take a look at what's going on domestically, because I definitely want to talk about the internal turmoil here in the U.S. Should we be forced into some kind of World War III or international war? I don't know if the U.S. has the stability to withstand something like that. Now, is the U.S. in a civil war? Some have argued it is. Some have argued it's civil strife, the precursor to civil war. And some have said it's a fifth generational civil war. And I've made some point about all of these ideas because I think it really comes down to semantics and where you think we're headed. I think about what was going on in the prelude to the precursor to the first American Civil War, the strong moral issue of slavery, and now we have abortion. But right now, we're hearing, man, it's just really intense online. The Texas GOP saying Joe Biden's not legitimate. And then I throw it back to Texas v. Pennsylvania, where Texas sued in the Supreme Court over all of these other states that changed their voter laws in what they said was a violation of the Constitution. The question for both of these moments, both internationally and domestically, is, will they escalate beyond this point? Because if they do, then we're in World War III. Then we are in a civil war. But if Lithuania tomorrow says, we apologize for the inconvenience, Russia, by all means, send in your concrete and your advanced technology components. We're sorry for the misunderstanding. Well, then maybe there's no world war. But Lithuania is saying, we got a blockade, we're blocking it. Well, actually, that's the reported statement. Apparently now they're even denying blocked it. So Russia could be lying, who knows? If tomorrow Russia issues a military strike on Lithuania or sends military in to escort their materials to Kaliningrad, that could be seen as an act of aggression and an escalation. And then when people look back on history and say, when did World War III start? They won't say Lithuania. They will say, well, the history is complicated. You know, the U.S. involvement in Ukraine with Joe Biden and Burisma, it could go all the way back to that point, which wraps up the internal domestic policies along with the international conflict into one major issue: instability globally. Now, where World War III and Civil War starts to become much more pronounced, in my opinion, is not Lithuania and NATO. It's the fact that Ukraine is down in their wheat exports. And when we talk about food shortages, people don't realize just how dangerous things are getting. As the saying goes, you're 3 meals away from a revolution. I don't know who said that. I was watching Jurassic World: The Domination, or whatever that new movie was called, and they mention it in the movie. But it is a fair point. And with food shortages on the horizon, diesel shortages and gas prices where they are, prices are going to skyrocket. The U.S. may be okay. But if we're facing civil war over these political issues, and the rest of the world is facing civil war over a lack of food, and there's a potential for World War III, it's getting pretty scary out there. But let's start with the first story and work our way through everything I just said. This is the story from the Daily Mail. But before we do get into it, head over to timcast.com and become a member to help support our work. As a member, you'll get access to exclusive segments from the Timcast IRL podcast, which are uncensored, available only at timcast.com, and a whole lot of swearing, not for the kids. We try to make everything else family friendly, but this is the one where the adults get to hang out. Go to timcast.com, click sign up in the top right of the website, become a member. We need your support. That is how, your membership is how we fund basically the entire operation. And if you think we do a good job, and these are the kinds of messages and the kind of news that needs to expand and do better, your support will make that happen. It's a subscription and membership world out there, and I hope one day our news enterprise subverts and replaces the corporate press. And hey, it already is, thanks to all of you. So don't forget to smash that like button. Subscribe to this channel right now on YouTube and share this video anywhere you can. Share the website. Get people involved. Let's win this culture war. Let's prevent the greater conflicts. And hopefully we can bring about some kind of peace through stability and unification. Unity. Let's read the news. The Daily Mail reports, prepare to fight and beat Russia in a third world war. Britain's top general warns. New UK Army commander tells troops to brace for European land war in tub-thumping message as tyrant Putin menaces ex-Soviet states. General Sir Patrick Sanders, who assumed overall command of the British Army this week, warned soldiers, quote, "We are the generation that must prepare the army to fight in Europe once again, as Russia's invasion of Ukraine rocks global stability." In a tub-thumping message to British troops, he wrote, "I am the first chief of the General Staff since 1941 to take command of the army in the shadow of a land war in Europe involving a continental power. The scale of the enduring threat from Russia shows we've entered a new era of insecurity. It is my singular duty to make our army as lethal and effective as it can be. The time is now and the opportunity is ours to seize. It comes as Putin menaces NATO countries and this week taunted former Soviet states in Europe by declaring they are part of historic Russia." Putin made the comments in response to a dramatic statement by Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, who sensationally declared he did not recognize the self-proclaimed People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine. Tokayev sat meters away from the brooding Russian despot at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum yesterday, described the DPR and LPR as quasi-state territories. "We don't recognize Taiwan, Kosovo, South Ossetia, and Abkhazia. We apply this principle to the quasi-state territories, which in our view are the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics," the Kazakh president said in a daring defiance of Putin's war in eastern Ukraine. The Russian president sat quietly, considering Tokayev's comments before appearing to deliver a calm but quietly menacing warning. "What is the Soviet Union?" Putin asked rhetorically. "This is historic Russia." He went on to paint Kazakhstan as a nation friendly to Russia, but quickly added, "The same thing could have happened with Ukraine, but they wouldn't be our allies." Maximilian Hess, a fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, told The Telegraph that Putin's retort to Tokayev was a clear threat and argued that Tokayev was reliant on Russian support following widespread riots in Kazakhstan in January. Now, I'm not super concerned about Kazakhstan necessarily. It's interesting to see potential instability. They're going to mention Boris urges world leaders to hold their nerve for a long war in Ukraine or risk the greatest victory for aggression in Europe since World War II, in dig at Macron's plea to make nice with warmonger Putin. So World War III. Now I'll say this. Editorial, hyperbolic. Yeah, maybe. To be completely honest, the Daily Mail may just be calling it a third world war. I think that's a generally fair assessment. But if Russia doesn't get any support from other countries, if a land war does break out, can you really call it a World War III? I don't know. World War III is interesting because it typically was great European powers anyway. Now, there was other war going on at the time. We will see. As it stands right now, the threat is real for World War III. From the Financial Times, Russia threatens retaliation against Lithuania following rail blockade. Baltic state halts transport via train of Russian goods under EU sanctions to exclave of Kaliningrad. For those that aren't familiar with Kaliningrad, it is north of Poland, and it is to the west and southwest of Lithuania. It is a Russian oblast, basically a state, on the Baltic Sea, but separated from Russia and surrounded by NATO member states. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. Belarus is also right here. Russia transports goods through Lithuania. Let's read the report. Moscow is threatened to retaliate against Lithuania after the Baltic state halted the rail transport of Russian goods under EU sanctions to the exclave of Kaliningrad. Russia's foreign ministry summoned Lithuania's charge d'affaires in Moscow on Monday to demand an immediate cancellation of the restrictions or face actions to defend Russia's national interests. Grigory Karasin, the former senior diplomat who chairs the Foreign Affairs Committee in Russia's upper house of parliament, said the demarche was harsh and warned any response would be quite decisive, according to Russian news agency Interfax. Lithuania, which controls the only overland rail route linking Kaliningrad with mainland Russia, at the weekend began limiting the export of goods covered by EU sanctions in retaliation for President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. The restrictions affected oil, cement, steel, iron, coal, and other goods amounting to slightly more than half of total Russian rail supplies to Kaliningrad, the ministry said. I like to pause. I called this one. At least the potential for it. I'd like to say I called it because they're always like, what did Tim even get right? I get a lot wrong. But when I get it right, this was obvious. This is what I pointed out months ago. If Russia is getting involved in conflict and Belarus is involved, how long until Belarus tells Lithuania or Poland we need a direct and secure land route into Kaliningrad? You think Russia is going to let one of its states be cut off? Imagine if the U.S. was sending a freighter to Hawaii with supplies and China blocked those boats from coming in, saying we control these waters. Now, I know it's a bit different because it's open Pacific. This is Lithuania's actual border of their country. But imagine what would happen if our supplies were unable to make it to our... Imagine if Canada blocked our shipments going into Alaska. For some reason. I mean, that would be very, very serious. And then we say you can't do that now. Canada and the U.S. are basically buddy-buddy. I understand it's not going to happen. But this is insane. Russia's not going to sit back and be like, guess our people starve. No, they're going to be like, Lithuania, you have not the power to stop us from getting supplies to our people. Will NATO intervene? They have to, according to the terms of the agreement of NATO. And if the United States said we're not getting involved, then NATO's basically worthless. And I'm sure Russia would try to prove that. Josip Borrell, the EU's chief diplomat, gave a full-throated defense of Lithuania's actions on Monday, saying that while he was always worried about Russia's retaliation, Lithuania was not guilty. Lithuania has not taken any unilateral national restrictions and only applies EU sanctions. Lithuania is doing nothing else but implementing the guidelines of the Commission. Oh, that is just brutal. Look, the EU told us we can't do it. It's nothing to do with us. That's amazing. Sandwiched between Lithuania and Poland, Kaliningrad has been a source of tension between Russia and Europe since the Baltic states declared independence from the USSR in 1991, leaving it without a direct overland route to Moscow. Russia's Baltic Fleet, which has almost 80 warships and submarines, is headquartered there. Moscow has also deployed nuclear-capable Iskander ballistic missiles in the region, though it has not said whether they carry nuclear warheads. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy head of Russia's Security Council, warned in April that it would be impossible for the region to remain non-nuclear if Finland and Sweden joined NATO, suggesting the possible nuclear deployment could be made official. The EU sanctions have isolated Kaliningrad further still, forcing Russian planes to make a detour over the Baltic Sea due to a ban on using the bloc's airspace. Lithuania rejected Russia's accusations. It acted unilaterally and said its move was in compliance with the EU measures, which contain different winding down periods, after which the goods in question can no longer be shipped to Russia. It's not Lithuania doing anything. It's the EU sanctions, said Gabrielis Landsbergis, Lithuania's foreign minister. It is done with consultations with the European Commission and under the European Commission guidelines. The Kremlin likened the restrictions to a blockade and said it would assess the situation before deciding whether and how to respond. Okay. NATO fighting Russia. Yeah, I'd call it World War III, but would China get involved? I think you would need China's involvement in support of or in concurrence with action against Russia or Russia against Lithuania. That is to say, China doesn't need to join a war on the side of Russia. It needs to just start a war and try to claim Taiwan or take action in the South China Sea. Then I think it's fair to say World War III. Or maybe with Belarus involved, we're going to start seeing things popping off. From Newsweek, World War III has started, said Russian TV. as Ukraine called a rehearsal. Russia's state TV host and guests have said that World War III has started, and noted Ukraine could be just the beginning of a potentially larger conflict with the West. There's a video going around, a photo. It shows Vladimir Putin holding the table. That's what they claim. And the argument is it proves he's sick. I don't care for these things. I really don't like those body language expert videos where it's like, here's a speech from so-and-so, and here's a body language expert. And it just so happens, the body language expert always has something to say that's negative towards the person or positive towards a person they like. It'll be like, I'm a body language expert, and Joe Biden here is clearly showing that he's lying and that he's sick. And it's like, okay, I get it. You don't like Biden. And they're like, here's Trump. His body positioning shows that he's a good man. And I'm like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Maybe Vladimir Putin's sick, maybe he's not. If he's sick, then expect war. Because I don't think he's going down without a fight. But if he's not sick, I don't know why it matters. Maybe one would make him more desperate. George Soros himself, May 24th, Reuters. Soros says Ukraine may be the start of World War III. We love our buzz terms, don't we? Civil War, World War III. Yo, I don't know. Call it whatever you want. Perhaps we call it World War III because it's like it likens the conflict, or it reminds us of the potential carnage that could come, akin to what we saw in the past, the bloodiest wars in history, World War II, Civil War. Vladimir Putin's pals warn of triggering World War III as Russia bares its teeth to NATO. The damning threat comes amid claims Russian President Vladimir Putin could declare martial law and mobilization in 5 Russian regions bordering Ukraine in desperate bid to boost his war effort. Okay. Let's talk about why else. Why else? Civil War, World War III, all of it. First of all, as you can see here as I pull up Twitter, Civil War is trending in the United States with 102,000 tweets. Okay. Pwn All the Things on Twitter is a NatSec, national security and info security, platform security pundit, verified on Twitter, saying a 40% collapse in actual harvest and an 80% collapse in harvest reaching the export market. When this starts to hit in earnest in fall, it's going to be really big and destabilizing globally. If this tsunami is coming, let me put it this way. We get a warning a hurricane is coming. We don't feel the brunt. And sometimes the hurricane changes course. In 2014, I think it was 2014, I was in Miami. I think it was 2014. I could be wrong. And we got word a hurricane was about to slam into the Panhandle State. Is that what they call it? The Panhandle State? I don't know, whatever. Florida. And I remember getting a hotel, and they were like, get ready for this one. It's going to be intense. You'll probably be okay, but get your supplies. And I was like, well, I'll be here to document what's going on. It was coming, and then at the last minute, it got blown north. And everyone's like, crisis averted. But we all saw the signs. We all were warned it was coming, and then we got lucky. They keep telling us. Take a look at this tweet. Dmitry Alperovich, he is Geopolitics National Security, Chairman Silverado Policy, founder Alperovich, co-founder CrowdStrike. He says, Ukraine's harvest may decline to 60 million tons of grain and oilseeds this year, 43% decrease according to Deputy Agricultural Minister Dmitrishevich. So far, Ukraine has exported 4 million tons in the last 4 months, versus a usual monthly export of 5 to 6 million tons. That is 1 million tons of, I believe, grain, 1 million tons per month, 1 million tons per month versus 5 to 6. Yo, that's more than a 43% decrease if you're doing the math. But let's talk about what happens in the world and why World War III is a real possibility. Pwn All the Things goes on to say, Lebanon imports 80% of its grain from Ukraine. Egypt, 50% from Russia and Ukraine. India, 70% of its sunflower oil from Ukraine. Turkey, Bangladesh, and Iran, 60% of their wheat from Russia and Ukraine. Also, key DONCs for Yemen, Libya, and Pakistan. A lot of flashpoints for heavy spiking food prices. In a shortfall of 50 million tons or so, it's going to be a bit tricky to cover on short notice. That is to say, those countries are in hot positions. And if people can't have food, what will it be? International war or civil war? Maybe both. Some of these countries, they're not going to fight themselves. They're going to say, how do we get food? And they'll declare war on their neighbor and say, we take the food from them. Because I'll tell you, my friends, let me ask you this. Do you think a person would starve to death, or do you think they would rob their neighbor for food to prevent themselves from starving to death? Do you think a man would let his child, or woman, a man or woman would let their child starve to death, or do you think they would rob their neighbor to make sure their children ate food? I am of the opinion that right now, many communities probably wouldn't rob their neighbors, but many communities would. I'll put it this way. A bunch of conservatives in a conservative neighborhood, they go to church. Are they going to rob their neighbors for food? Probably not. What about that community banding together and then raiding other neighborhoods where they don't know people? Now, that seems a whole lot more likely. Now, in terms of these more conservative communities, they're probably more likely to be in suburban and rural areas where they can probably grow some of their own food, so that'll alleviate some of the pressures. In big cities, there's no community in big cities. People don't know who their neighbors are. Yeah, they're going to raid their neighbors. I absolutely loved this headline from NBC News. Trump gets impeachment revenge on Tom Rice in South Carolina, but Nancy Mace prevails. Well, she did. Trump has endorsed many candidates, and he's doing really well. The candidates that he endorses tend to win. Not all of them, but many of them. Here's where this story gets crazy. Tom Rice, as the incumbent, lost by like 25 plus points. I mean, this was brutal. Donald Trump is the Republican Party. You know what? I get it. The Trump supporters, the diehards, they are not big fans of me. They, our good friends over at Patriots.win, formerly the Donald, they routinely rag on me, say he's a fence sitter, and they call me names. But I get it. I do. We may disagree on many issues, but I certainly think for a lot of reasons Donald Trump is right. Now, that doesn't mean I think he's the best candidate. I'm kind of torn between Trump and Ron DeSantis. Truth be told, Ron DeSantis has got more tact. For a lot of reasons, I think he would be a better president than Donald Trump. However, I don't think DeSantis would go in like a bull in a china shop. I think he's going to go in. He's going to do well. I think he would do a fantastic job. I think DeSantis has done wonderfully in Florida. I think Trump did a lot of things wrong that DeSantis wouldn't do. But right now, my friends, we're looking at Donald Trump's revenge. And it is nearly complete. Well, I shouldn't say nearly complete because depending on how you frame Donald Trump's revenge, it could be as simple as the rhinos who voted to impeach Trump are going to get wiped out. They're going to lose their elections. Or you could say Donald Trump's ultimate revenge is getting reelected and then actually draining the swamp. Trump made that mistake. He got into office and he brought swamp monsters in with him. I mean, I always say it, John Bolton, he got some bad advice. And he ended up getting jammed up for 2 or 3 years. 2019 was pretty good economically. 2020 was COVID, so Trump did not get a fair chance at just leading this ship. He had intelligence agencies on him. He had lawsuit after lawsuit. He had the phony investigations, the Russiagate hoax. So I kind of feel like if Donald Trump were to get in at this point, he's going to clean house. He's going to say, no, 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 everybody out. But it's hard to say for sure. Elon Musk recently came out and said he voted Republican for the first time. A historically Democrat district in Texas flipped Republican. Elon Musk says he voted for this woman, not the Democrat. And he's leaning towards Ron DeSantis in 2024. So it remains to be seen. But my friends, I would like to bring to you now the current state of Donald Trump's revenge. I just love the way that sounds. It's funny. You see, 10 Republicans voted to impeach Donald Trump. Donald Trump now, one of them has lost. We're likely going to see Liz Cheney lose. She's leading the January 6 hearings, and she's 30 points underwater. But several other Republicans who voted to impeach Trump have retired or announced their retirement is coming. One Democrat who refused to impeach, Jeff Van Drew, he won in a landslide in a moderate district. We don't talk about a red wave, baby. Let's talk about that. Jeff Van Drew winning a landslide means regular people are like, this is what we want. We are sick of everything else. Yeah, I'm sick of the Republicans. I am. I'm sick of the Democrats, but I'm absolutely sick of the Republicans. Well, let's take a look at this news and talk about what's going on. But my friends, I want to add one more point to this intro. It's the economy, stupid. Yeah, the Fed is talking about hiking interest rates. Some say, what else are you going to do? This inflation is out of control. Better leadership, I suppose, better energy production. But when that hits, people are going to figuratively revolt. I mean, hopefully they don't literally revolt. But they're going to say enough of this. And they might bring back Donald Trump. Because what memory do they have? Barack Obama? Well, they tried that with Biden. That didn't work. They're going to say 2019 was great. But we'll see. I think looking at Trump's revenge, these people losing these elections, his endorsements winning, and Jeff Van Drew winning shows cultural issues do matter. And when it comes to Donald Trump, he is more trustworthy than the word Democrat. Let's read the story. But before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member to help support our work. As a member, you'll get exclusive access to segments. You'll get access to exclusive segments, phrase it properly, of the Timcast IRL podcast. Last night, we had Zer0eher0e and Jorge Ventura on the show talking about border issues, talking about Ezra Miller. These are not family friendly. It's family friendly. It's Timcast After Dark. Check those episodes out. But as a member at timcast.com, you're supporting our journalists who strive every day to give you the best fact-based news. I am very strict when it comes to reporting. And you're supporting our infrastructure. We use Rumble because we don't want to support big tech censorship, and we want to be more resilient. So we can use your support over at timcast.com. Let's read that first story. From NBC News, Trump gets impeachment revenge on Tom Rice in South Carolina, but Nancy Mace prevails. This is interesting. Rep. Tom Rice, targeted by former President Donald Trump for voting to impeach him after the Capitol riot, was defeated by a Trump-backed challenger in South Carolina Tuesday night, while Rep. Nancy Mace, who also incurred Trump's ire for criticizing him over January 6th, prevailed. Yeah, but hold on a minute. Trump deserves to be criticized for January 6th. He could have came out much more strongly than he did. That doesn't mean I'm saying he did anything wrong. He had a rally and some bad people, some people did some stupid stuff. There was a riot. It was bad. A lot of people, the Magamimo, as they call them, had the doors open for them, didn't know what was going on. I think the whole thing was bad. Don't get me wrong. But Donald Trump could have done a better job. Just to say, it's kind of like, it's not Trump's fault. He said, let's go home and be peaceful. He said he wanted a peaceful march. So her criticism of Donald Trump there, I'm not surprised she won. Rice's primary defeat in the state's 7th congressional district at the hands of state rep Russell Fry marks the first time this election cycle that a pro-impeachment Republican has lost at the ballot box. Rice's loss also delivered Trump his first victory against an incumbent this year. Trump-backed candidates had lost 5 straight races against incumbents entering Tuesday. Trump was successful in ousting Rep. David McKinley in West Virginia, but McKinley was up against another incumbent in Rep. Alex Mooney. They were put into the same district as part of redistricting this year. But in South Carolina's 1st congressional district, a different story unfolded. Mace's victory over former state rep Katie Arrington meant yet another loss for Trump in his effort to exact revenge on Republicans he's deemed disloyal. Trump reacted to both projected outcomes on his Truth Social platform. He called Arrington a long shot who ran a great race and way overperformed, adding congrats to Nancy Mace, who should easily be able to defeat her Democrat opponent. Turning his attention to Fry and Rice, he wrote, "The biggest news of the evening so far is that Russell Fry beat impeach master Tom Rice with a vote of more than 51%, therefore winning outright with no need for a runoff. Rice surprised many by joining 9 other Republicans in voting to impeach Trump after the former president's supporters stormed the Capitol on January 6th. The congressman knew his impeachment vote could cost him re-election, but expressed no regrets in an interview with NBC News last week. Yeah, well, what about those other Republicans? They're retiring. First, let me show you the hard numbers. Russell Fry with 51.1% to Tom Rice's 24.5%. That is apocalyptic. You go up against Trump, you get wiped out. Now on the left, they say, see, this is the Trump cult. This is the Trump. No, it's not. It really isn't. There certainly is a Trump cult. I certainly think so. There are people who just, no matter what Trump does, they will defend him every turn. I think Trump deserves to be defended from a lot of these attacks because As it turns out, the media lies all the time. But come on, man. Nobody is above criticism. Well, that being said, Donald Trump did a pretty good job with what he had, and so his endorsements matter. It's not about blindly following Trump. For me personally, I like Trump because he's challenging the system. He's not perfect. He's fairly moderate, but I'm just sick of the games. I'm sick of the establishment, the manipulation, and the lies. And we want someone who can stand up and say enough. Now, Ron DeSantis can do that. The question is, I'm worried that, will Ron DeSantis get into office and say, we're shutting her down? I mean, like going after the cronies and firing people. I think Ron DeSantis might get in and fall into the same trap Trump did. He's going to say, okay, we'll fire some of these people, we'll bring some people in, we need some experts, and then the swamp monsters are going to be there and they're going to get them. I think at this point, Donald Trump is going to go in and go, excuse me, no, you're fired, out of the building. And I'm going to be like, thank you. But we'll see. Professionally, I like DeSantis more. I recently appeared, this is a couple months ago. Actually, how long ago was this? This was several months ago. It was April, I think. I appeared on the Daily Wire's Backstage Live, and we talked about this. And I said, I lean toward, look, I'm a moderate guy. I've always been traditionally liberal, voted Democrats. Even in 2020, I was supporting Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang. Still like Tulsi. I think she's wrong on certain things. Andrew Yang, I don't trust. Bernie Sanders, I don't trust. And so I'm like, I think DeSantis. I really do. I think he's conservative. I think he's bad on certain things. I'm not sure if I trust him on free speech issues, but he's substantially better than everything else. The question is, will he do right in getting into D.C. and getting rid of the swamp monsters? I'm not entirely sure. Now let's take a look at this real quick. 7th District primary. Russell Fry, as I mentioned, with 51.1%. Tom Rice, the incumbent, losing. You remember this story because I covered it when it happened because I love it. Democrat turned Republican wins landslide victory. People don't want Biden's dysfunctional America. Now, Jeff Van Drew was a Democrat, refused to impeach Trump. Then he switches to the Republican Party, wins a landslide. But get this. It's a GOP primary landslide. I think he got, 85%? Winning 85% of the vote. You know why? Trump supporters are not far right. Some of them, maybe. They're not QAnon creepy conspiracy cultists. They're regular people. Jeff Van Drew, a moderate former Democrat, got 85% of the GOP primary vote. That is to say, these primary voters, regular people, not far right, this is what they're looking for. Donald Trump's endorsement is worth a certain amount, maybe 20 to 30 points in some cases. But you've got the incumbent advantage. You've got a moderate politician backed by Trump, and people are like, yes, please. I think Jeff Van Drew refusing to impeach was a powerful statement. And for this, he's won. This is what we want to see. This is unity. A former Democrat winning a Republican primary, that is unity. Republicans voting for a Democrat in their primary? Because this guy's shown principle and authenticity. I saw a great quote. It was a young person who said, it was actually, I think a comment was made to us on Timcast IRL. They said, I'm a young voter, and I would vote for Logan Paul over any one of these inauthentic establishment politicians. And you know what? I agree. I got to be honest. I actually think Logan Paul's pretty legit. I've seen some of his stuff. He's a good dude. You know, look, the Paul brothers are not, they've had their issues. But you really take a look at the hard work they put in, their ethos and everything, and, well, Jake Paul may be a little crazier, but he also ragged on Joe Biden. Logan Paul is a hard worker. I dig the work Logan Paul does. Now, you look at these guys, and you look at the authenticity people feel from seeing them, and it's true. Now, granted, I think Jake and Logan Paul aren't that authentic. I'm not saying that to drag them. I'm saying their personalities. They do a show. It's not the same as somebody who does vlogs like this and kind of just wings it with no script. But I do think they are substantially more authentic than 99.9% of politicians. That's why I think it matters so much that Jake Paul came out and slammed Joe Biden. Look, I'm citing these YouTube guys. I was like, what's up with that? Jake Paul, little YouTube troublemaker, big following. I say little, I mean that as in like he's making a little bit of trouble here and there, but he's a big prominent celebrity. And he's coming out and saying Joe Biden's the problem. You know what he said? Biden's accomplishments: highest gas prices, worst inflation, plummeting crypto, highest rent prices ever, and a new incomprehensible language. If you're reading this and voted for Biden and you still don't regret it, then you are the American problem. Bravo, dude. Man, I like the Paul brothers now. Actually, I've been a fan of Logan Paul for a while, since I watched him do that boxing match. And he said there was like some guy who snuck in and he made some comments about working hard, doing your thing. And I was like, this dude's all right. It's like I watch his stuff. I've seen the smear pieces about him, but I think they're all right, man. Now, Jake Paul, I don't know a whole lot about, but if he's going to come out and be clear-minded about the Joe Biden problem, respect. Let's jump over to our good friends over at Patriots.win. I always say our good friends because it's either true or it's not true. That's why it's funny. Patriots.win. Oh, it's a love-hate relationship. The guys over at the Donald, they, what did I say? I said July is MAGA month, and that means we're all going to change our profile pictures to have American flags behind us, and we're going to grill every weekend. And then they were like, every weekend? You mean every day? And I'm like, okay, agreed. But they were like, Tim is right. And then whenever they make a post about me, it's like a bunch of people arguing whether I'm, like a cuck, or I'm correct, or I'm just red-pilling people, or whatever. I don't, and to my good friends over at Patriots.win, I don't come to the Donald all that often. Some people think I'm there all the time. I'm not really. Some people have pointed out that if I went there more often, I might have more facts. I think that's actually fairly true. When the Donald posts something that corrects the fake news, like when the media lies about Trump or the right, they'll have the correct version up, typically more often and much faster than other sources. So maybe I'll dive into what they're saying more often than I do. But anyway, they have this post that says, U.S. Rep. Tom Rice, one of 10 House Republicans to vote to impeach Donald Trump over the January 6th insurrection, has been ousted from Congress in his South Carolina GOP primary race. Rice was defeated by State Rep. Russell Fry, who was backed by Trump. Now here we can see Kinzinger, retired. Upton, retired. Katko, retired. Gonzalez, retired. Rice loses. Now what about the remaining individuals? You got Butler in Washington, you got Newhouse in Washington, you got Cheney in Wyoming, and you got Valdo in California. You got Meyer in Michigan. We'll see. I can say for Liz Cheney, not looking good. First, let me bring you to this piece. GOP Rep. Fred Upton. Let's talk about Donald Trump's revenge. It's not really revenge. Tom Rice losing is funny, but the rest of them are just retiring. Trump doesn't even need to do anything. These people know they cannot win. Tom Rice was like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to go up against Trump and then he lost. Check this out. The Michigan Republican, one of the longest tenured Republicans in the House, retired. Upton was one of 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach then president. He has decided to retire rather than seek re-election in 2022. Adam Kinzinger. Oh, you know him, you love him. Kinzinger, retiring from Congress, vows broader fight nationwide against Trumpism. Of course, you know that he's one of 10 House Republicans to vote to impeach the president, and he's on the January 6th committee. Next up, we have Republican Rep. John Katko, who voted for Trump's impeachment, is retiring. Look at them. They're all just bowing out. Anthony Gonzalez is retiring. Here's what happened to the House Republicans who voted to impeach Trump. This from September 17th, 2021. They know they can't win. Donald Trump brought in new voices, new faces, and a new energy to the Republican Party that cannot be denied. And of course, then we have Liz Cheney. Oh, Liz Cheney. I tweeted, my favorite holiday is Liz Cheney getting voted out of office day. Because I don't like Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney comes from a troubled legacy, as it were. I think she's duplicitous. I think she is establishment. She's an establishment politician. Their whole thing is power, manipulation. They want war. Not a fan. Liz Cheney is underwater. Take a look at this story from Politico. As Cheney files for re-election, poll from rival group shows her trailing badly. The survey conducted by the Club for Growth is consistent with other data out of Wyoming in the last year. So she is going to take the Tom Rice route, it appears. She's going to run for re-election. Maybe she wins. I don't know. I don't trust her. Maybe she wins. I cannot imagine the people of Wyoming, which I believe is the #1 most Trump-supporting state in the country, are going to vote for one of the most ardent anti-Trump politicians in Congress. Politico reported May 27th, GOP Rep. Liz Cheney is down 30 points in a new survey of her August primary. conducted by the Club for Growth, which is opposing the embattled incumbent. The poll, which provides perhaps the starkest illustration yet of the political peril Cheney faces this year, shows Wyoming attorney Harriet Hageman garnering 56% of the vote to Cheney's 26% in the GOP primary. A third Republican got 12% support, and just 6% are undecided. Hageman was recruited and endorsed by former President Donald Trump in response to Cheney's vote to impeach him last year, alongside 9 other Republicans. The race for Wyoming's lone congressional district is one where the Club for Growth and Trump, who have quickly turned from allies to foils, are aligned. Though the club has not formally endorsed Hageman, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, mind you. The poll, shared first with Politico, was conducted this
Jackson, can you believe the vitriol people throw at a party with no money and no power while voting for the Democrats?
They just hear a lie that's made by someone randomly on the internet, do no research of investigating it, and then regurgitate it.
Yeah,
it's just like the mainstream media propaganda about any of these stories we cover.
They act like somehow the People's Party is somehow commensurate with the Democrat and Republican Party, and they're corrupt. What they don't have any. They have nothing. They don't. There's no super.
They act like the People's Party is a megalodon hoard of cash that
Yes.
It's like, and they have like Hugh Hefner's house in LA, and they're throwing big parties there. That's what they act like. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. So let's get to this. So Crystal Ball went on Bill Maher, and Bill Maher reminded me of why I would get so vitriolic about him when I would scream at the top of my lungs about his craziness, because he's just he's in a bubble. He's in a bubble, and it's a class bubble. He's in a millionaire bubble, right? So when he talks to a regular person, it's when they're waiting on him, or they're shining his shoes, or they're driving him somewhere. Do you see what I'm saying? And those are different conversations than you would have if you actually know those people. So here they are, and they're gonna say that the problem today is because the United States government spent too much money helping people during the lockdowns, which, as you know, was the exact opposite happened. What they did was they passed a $5 trillion CARES Act, and almost none of that money went to help people. Almost all that money got grifted to the richest oligarchs in the country and the richest corporations, like airline companies, stuff like that. It didn't go to help people. You know who did that? Other countries made sure that if they locked down your business, other countries, meaning in the Western world, and if they locked down your business, you got a check. They would pay your salary. That didn't happen in the United States. Everybody got a one-time pay. What did you get? $1,400 and then $600? They got $2,000 for 2 years. Other people got their salaries paid in Western democracies that function, that aren't completely corporate captured like ours. So this guy and Bill Maher don't know what the hell they're talking about, and Crystal Ball does. And so this guy says that we spent too much money helping people, like the people who were unemployed because they closed their frickin' place of employment. And watch what CrystalAll says.
The economy. There's way too much government spending, and that's why we have inflation. So that's a large part of that. It's just basic economics. And
that is not basic economics. We had this thing called a pandemic. We had a supply chain crisis, and by the way, there's a war in Ukraine.
It's played a role.
So to act like the only reason we have problems now is because people got a little bit of money in their bank account is just not honest.
And a little bit of money, they got more than we spent in World War II. So don't act.
When he says a little money, when he says they, who do you mean they? Does he mean, so is he talking about the CARES Act? Because the CARES Act didn't go to they, the workers, they, the people. It went to they, the oligarchy. It was a fleecing of America, as Dylan Radigan and other people explained on this show. It was a fleecing. They didn't give money to people. They didn't help people barely at all. And that, as Dylan Radigan explained on this show and described it, the CARES Act was the equivalent of if your economy was a car and your car was broken down on the freeway, you would send a tow truck to fix it or to tow it away and get it fixed. What the CARES Act was the government sending a bunch of criminals to pull the tires off, strip the engine, and take the stereo out and then take off. That's what the CARES Act was. And instead of taking that money and giving it to people, they took that money and they gave it to rich people already. and they threw it into the stock market and other places. And Bill Maher doesn't understand that because Bill Maher only hangs out with other people who are millionaires. I'm jealous. I aspire to that. Okay, how about that? So here we go.
Like
hold on.
Whoa.
Hold on.
Don't act like, you said don't act. Don't act like we had to react to the pandemic exactly the way we did. We had to spend $6 trillion.
Okay, but how about the trillions that the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street? For some reason, people don't get upset about that.
How much?
And
What'd you
that
say?
fueled the trillions of dollars the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street to backstop the stock market and the bond market. No one gets upset about that, even though that was a massive
I don't know
factor
what
in
you're talking
inflation.
about. What do you mean shot at Wall Street?
Well,
when are we talking about?
We're talking about buying assets, buying stocks, buying bonds, buying treasury bills so that they expand the balance sheet. This is during the crisis, the coronavirus crisis. When the stock market crashed, that is what the Fed did. They went into action. They shot
But the
trillions
stock market
of dollars
didn't crash during
Now it's
It
crashing.
did.
So this is what happens when you get your news from MSNBC. Bill Maher is getting his news from his pal Rachel Maddow. Where do you think he's getting his news? And he's like, what? There wasn't a crash of the stock market at the beginning of COVID. Yes, there was. But guess what? They just threw money at it. It was a money cannon. That was a headline. That was one headline I remember covering. So he's completely doesn't know what he's talking about, and Crystal Ball does, and she goes on.
Crashing now.
It crashed, and the Fed came in and backstopped it. That's what happened.
What, it crashed and we
that's
never
what
heard
I'm
about
saying.
it?
No, it crashed. Go back and look at it.
I think
it fell off a cliff.
When?
The Treasury bond market stopped functioning. The Fed took extraordinary action it's never taken in history.
I don't
Somehow
remember
no one
that.
gets upset.
I don't remember that.
Somehow nobody gets upset about the rich people who got tons of money and tons of support, way more than working class people did.
Sure
but
they
oh
do.
my God, people were able to feed their kids and they had a little bit of money in their bank accounts. It was the worst thing in the world.
No.
That is one small part of the inflation story, and is, by the way, not the only thing that we can deal with to get out of this.
Okay, so I think we solved the mystery of why no one gets mad at the trillion spent to bail out Wall Street during the pandemic, and it's because Bill Maher didn't know about it.
He's the barometer for what people know about. He really is.
He really is. Why didn't anyone know about it? Well, there were more important things to worry about. Masks, celebrity tweets about masks, and which superheroes were gay. So what was she talking about? She's talking about this. This is from PBS NewsHour. Federal Reserve to lend additional $1 trillion a day to large banks. The Fed is also buying treasury bonds, just as she said. The Fed is also buying treasury bonds at a furious pace and will soon run through $500 billion in purchases it announced on Sunday. It's also accelerating its purchase of mortgage-backed securities. Most analysts expect they will buy more. All the Fed's emergency steps are intended to pump cash. Now remember, what Bill Maher and that other guy was saying was that inflation is because we put too much the government spent too much cash helping people. They didn't spend almost no money helping people, fuckface. That was the problem with the CARES Act. It didn't help anybody. It just enriched the already rich. And which they don't know anything about the CARES Act. Bill Maher doesn't know anything about the CARES Act, and whoever that asswipe is sitting next to Crystal Ball also has no idea what's in the CARES Act or what it was. Like most Democrats and most fucking YouTubers don't know what the fucking CARES Act was. They reported it incorrectly.
Yeah, I only heard about it on here at the time.
That's right. The rest of them.
That's the only first time I heard of it.
Kyle Kalinske and all those fuckers, they're all saying, "Oh, they had to pass this to get the unemployment through. They had to help. They had to do this. Bernie had to do this so he could get the unemployment." That's what Ro Khanna came on my show and said that. He said we had to pass the CARES Act because we had to get unemployment benefits to people. And I said, Ro, how happy are you that the only person who knows you're bullshitting is me, a fucking pothead comedian, and no one else is going to hold your feet to the fire? And he pretended like he didn't hear me say that because he couldn't. He couldn't admit he knows that. He had to admit that he had to pretend that didn't happen. And nobody who interviews fucking Ro Khanna is ever going to hold his feet to the fire for that bullshit vote on the CARES Act.
You know, a good rule of thumb is if they send a pittance to you, you can be sure they sent a fortune to somebody already rich just for you to get whatever little nonsense pittance that you got while you were locked down.
So they're given and they didn't run any of this by Bill Maher. No. So now Bill Maher looks like some old guy who doesn't know shit. He's like the male Joy Behar. Because nobody picked up a phone and told Bill Maher that we're going to be pumping cash into the financial system. So if you remember, this guy here watch what he says.
The economy. There's way too much government spending, and that's why we have inflation. It's a large.
But he's not upset about this government spending. And they're pretending like the CARES Act government spending went to help regular people. It was the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history. I don't know if Crystal Ball said that. Maybe she doesn't know what's in the CARES Act, but maybe she did say that. I didn't see the whole segment, but I would have said that. I wouldn't have known the other stuff she said. That was good that she brought that shit up. I had to look it up, and she was right. So the CARES Act, which she could have debunked it right then and there. No, that was the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history. That was not social spending to help workers. Kind of a fucking chump do you think we are? Go ahead, Jackson.
Even it's just like all across the political spectrum, people understand this that are reasonable. I don't see how Bill Maher missed. Even Peter Schiff, he said while inflation was limited to the stock market, you had this pumping of cash into the top, corporations, and then they did stock buybacks. Like, I feel like this would have made Bill Maher's friends happy. He should have known about this.
Well, they all got rich off it. Go ahead.
I invested all my money into an NFT of a mortgage-backed security.
1.5 trillion. Wow. $1 trillion a day. You know how many 20-year dirty wars we could wage with that kind of money? Here it is, 1.5 trillion to prop up crashing markets. That's just a simple cash injection of 1.5 trillion, and then they get a lollipop, and everybody forgets the whole thing. Look at Bill Maher. The Fed said it will ramp up. This is from Forbes. The Fed said it will ramp up its overnight funding operations, buying repos or repurchase agreements by 1.5 trillion over the next 2 days. It's the third time in 4 days the New York Fed has announced that it will bulk up lending in the repo market. On Tuesday, it announced an injection of $50 billion, and it added another $25 billion on Wednesday. That's enough to cure homelessness, just so you know. And they did it with there was no town hall, no debate, no nothing. That guy just presses a button at the Fed, and that's what happened. That's it. That guy presses a button, and it's done. There's no democracy involved here.
They did have some meetings. Bilderberg meeting. It was a big one that they had.
Crystal Ball, hilariously showing Bill Maher, he's in the right-wing bubble he used to mock conservatives for being in. He is not in a right-wing bubble. He is in a bubble. The bubble he's in is a class bubble. He's in a class. He's the same kind of guy who open-minded lefty who couldn't understand why Trump got elected in the first place. He thought it was all racism and sexism, which is what people in his class think. How do I know this? Because I'm in Hollywood, and I used to, a lot more than now, I used to travel in those circles. I used to get invited to those parties. I don't anymore, after I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton, but I used to get invited to those parties until after Trump got elected, and I started telling people, no, it wasn't racism and sexism. We've always had that in this country. The Republican Party's been doing the Southern strategy since Nixon. This isn't new racism. This is the corporation trying to blame racism for people not willing to vote for the corporation anymore. That's what that was. People were hurting. People voted for Obama, and their lives got worse. And that's what people like Bill Maher don't understand, because his life keeps getting better. Financially, I mean. So go ahead, Kurt.
Don't you like when they go, don't they know that don't you know that Trump hates you? Like, well, maybe not, but they know you hate them. You make that clear.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what these people, that's what Bill Maher thinks. He's in that bubble. I'm not kidding. I went to a party one time with everybody from TV networks, right? All executive producers and all rich people, and it was crazy. They all said that. Oh, this is racism and sexism. It was right after Donald Trump got elected. And I was just sitting there like, wow, people really believe this shit. And it's a class bubble. And that's what I think. So here's another thing she says. She goes, the more unequal and brutal our society gets, the crazier people behave, and then elites swoop in to tell us our real problem is our fellow citizens, not ruling class theft, rigging, and failures. She sounds like Jimmy Dore. Holy shit. But if I say that, they'll tell me I'm a nihilist. Jackson, aren't you a nihilist if you say this exact thing? Isn't this
yes.
isn't this what they're calling nihilism, Jackson?
And white supremacy. You can't forget about that.
That's right. That's also white supremacy. If you have this thought in your head and you and you talk about it, you're called a white supremacist and a nihilist. She'll do it herself, correct? Yep. Okay. So that's the problem so great job by Cristobal on Bill Maher. Bill Maher certainly gives it to you on a platter. Two fucking morons don't know shit what they're talking about, and then Cristobal gets to look like a genius. But she also speaks out of both sides of her mouth. And here's another one. Here's what she would call nihilism today.
Because whether they want to admit it or not, they do in fact need us in order to win. Now
she's talking about the Democratic Party needs people who consider themselves progressive. Now that term means nothing anymore because Hillary Clinton calls herself a progressive, but that's what she's saying. Actual progressives, they can't win without. She's talking about Bernie voters in the primary, stuff like that. They can't win without us. And so why not flex that muscle? This is what she used to say.
Certainly prefer not to have to give up anything of substance in order to get us on board. But in fact, their fixation on Trump and Trump alone does give us an advantage. The only question, the big one, is if we're willing to use it. If we're actually willing, in a coordinated fashion, to make demands and be willing to withhold our votes. Individual voters here and there making their own unaffiliated decisions are, in fact, powerless. But as always, solidarity could be powerful. The only question, and again, it is an incredibly weighty one, is whether we're actually willing to grab that power and risk actually being the reason that Trump is reelected. Because while I think it's highly likely that because of their anti-Trump desperation, Democrats would cave to virtually any demands backed up by a truly credible threat, there's of course a chance that they don't. And there's of course a chance that such a coordinated anti-Biden opposition from the left would in fact result in a Trump reelection. And let's not sugarcoat what that means. It means being ready to carry the Trump admin's actions on your conscience, including the orphan babies at the border.
So does that mean when you voted for Biden, you're carrying all this shit on your conscience? Are you carrying that there's actually more kids in cages now? Is that on your conscience? And every bad thing you said Trump was doing, Biden's doing worse? Is that on your conscience? I don't think it is.
We have done well here. Footsie with white nationalists, the deadly level of sheer incompetence. It means being willing to be absolutely and thoroughly despised, seen as true villains, or perhaps an even greater magnitude than Trump.
So this
$40 billion to them.
Yeah. So, yeah, you risk being called a white nationalist if you don't want to send money to white nationalists in Ukraine. And that's now called being nihilist, right? That's now called being a nihilist, right, Jackson? What you just said there, that to withhold your vote, don't participate, don't vote for them anymore. That's called even under the threat of Trump, right? Now that's called nihilism.
Exactly.
Okay. So I just want to give everybody, even though she made some great points on Bill Maher, and I commend her for it, and I'm glad she was there to do it. There's a schizophrenia happening with people like that, and that's the nicest way I could put it. A lot of people, It seems disingenuous, but we'll see. Anyway, anything else you guys have would like to say about this segment? But the Bill Maher, anything about Bill Maher or the?
Oh, you want to hear a funny? How when I was in the store not that long ago, and this woman approaches him and she goes, "Hey, my friend is stewardess on private jets." And Bill Maher, she was working while Bill Maher's on the jet, and she goes, "Hey, did you ever see this impression of you that Kyle Tunney does?" And then she was told not to approach Mr. Maher again. She had to sit in the back of the jet. He's big on taking a joke, not so much on a private jet, it turns out.
Wow. Wow.
She doesn't care for that impression.
That's funny. So Bill Maher is back to being the shit lib we always knew he was. And of course he doesn't know. And of course he doesn't know about this, not because he's a right winger, but because he's in a different class. Because he wasn't sitting home hoping the government was going to give him some unemployment, hoping that the government was going to give him enough money to buy medicine for his kid, or buy medicine for himself, or pay his rent, or whatever. And he wasn't upset that this happened because it didn't affect him. He wasn't sitting at home broke, about to become homeless, and watching the government pledge $1 trillion a day to the banks.
You know, even more importantly, it means all of his writers didn't know about this.
That's right. Hey, again, it is a class thing. And, you know, doesn't make you a bad person to be in a bubble, right? Because you don't know you're in a bubble, right? But it does make him unbelievably incurious. And it does show how it affects you. Barack Obama, Chris Hayes wrote a book about this. Talked about just being close to these people affects you. Barack Obama said being in the room with all those moneyed people, it changes you. And so Bill Maher's entire life for the last 30 years, which his life I'm totally jealous of, has been traveling in those circles with those people. And so he doesn't understand that the government isn't spending money on workers. He doesn't get that. Anyway, all right, that's it. Over to Steph.
All right, here we go. France is banning outdoor events due to heat. Get the feeling they just want the poor to stay inside. Thank you, Von Range. Matt's retiring. It was heartbreaking to see Crystal just nod along with Bill later in the show when they got onto Russiagate. No mention. It was all Clinton propaganda.
Oh, you're shitting me.
Matt's retiring. That's
what I'm talking about with Chris. That's what I'm talking about.
Crystal shouldn't pick up strays. Ricky Ganji. Jimmy, this is from Banana Split Cream Buns. Jimmy, some guy whose channel is devoted to reporting every brain fart from Candace Owen, Ben Shapiro, and Dave Rubin, tells me that you don't spend enough time criticizing Republicans. Oh boy. Banana Split Cream Buns. January 6th was a free kick the GOP gave the Democrats. The Democrats used that free kick to score an own goal. Vienticus Prime, I told you about those repo operations that are now $2 trillion a day. That's part of as well. It's been going on since September 2019. And last one, the Fed started a repo operation so they could say that they weren't still doing QE, even though it's QE. All right, back to Jim Jam. Uh-oh, hold on. Stand by. Getting adjusted.
Okay. What is this? I'm sorry. Okay. So, more news about Uvalde. Is that how you say it? Uvalde? I want to call it Navalny. Anyway, source: police never tried to open the door to classrooms where the Uvalde gunman had kids. They never tried to open that door. That's the headline.
He wasn't barricaded?
No.
Wow.
It's kind of amazing. The surveillance footage shows that police never tried to open a door to 2 classrooms at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde in the 77 minutes between the time a gunman entered the rooms and massacred 21 people and officers finally stormed in and killed him, according to a law enforcement source close to the investigation. Investigators believe the 18-year-old gunman who killed 19 children and 2 teachers at the school on May 24th could not have locked the door to the connected classrooms from the inside, according to the source. All classroom doors at Robb Elementary are designed to lock automatically when they are closed so that the only way to enter from the outside is with a key. Police might have assumed the door was locked, but the latest evidence suggests it may have been open the whole time, possibly due to a malfunction. The gunman, Ramos, entered Robb Elementary at 11:33 a.m. that day through an exterior door that a teacher had pulled shut, but that didn't lock automatically as it was supposed to, indicating another malfunction in door locks at the school. Police finally opened the door to classroom 111 and killed Ramos at 12:50 p.m. Whether the door was unlocked all along remains under investigation. Regardless, officers had access to the entire time to a Halligan. That's a crowbar-like tool that could have opened the door to the classrooms even if it was locked. 2 minutes after Ramos entered the building, 3 Uvalde police officers chased him inside. Footage shows that Ramos fired rounds inside classroom 111 and 112, briefly exited into the hallway, and then re-entered through the door. Ramos then shot at the officers through the closed door, grazing 2 of them with shrapnel. The officers retweeted to wait for backup and heavy tactical equipment rather than force their way into the classrooms. So there's little kids in there being shot, and those guys who are cops and have guns decided to not do anything. When a custodian, now listen to this. So a custodian brings a large key ring. They tried dozens of keys, but none of them worked. But they weren't trying it on the door where the guy was. They were trying it on another door. So if they would have tried it on the door where the guy was with the gun, they would have realized the door wasn't even locked. But they didn't try that door. They were trying it on another door. Rather, he was trying to locate a master key by using the various keys on doors to other classrooms. While Arnando waited for a tactical team to arrive, children and teachers inside the classroom called 911 at least 7 times with desperate pleas for help. Would someone come in here and help us? One of the 2 teachers who died, Eva Morales, she called her husband by cell phone after she was wounded and laid dying. Days after the massacre, Stephen McCraw, director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, said at a news conference that each door can lock from the inside, and that when Ramos went in, he locked the door. Well, no, that wasn't true. It looks like that was not true, and that guy was giving some more bullshit information. Remember the bullshit information he gave that there was a teacher who propped the door open? That was bullshit. And now he's saying he said that Ramos had locked the door from the inside. Now it looks like that was also bullshit. That information was preliminary, the source said, and further investigation by Texas Rangers has yielded new revelations about the door. As the investigation has unfolded, law enforcement has changed the story of the massacre several times, adding to public confusion over how police responded to the mass shooting. Days after the shooting, DPS said the exterior door that Ramos entered had been left propped open by a teacher. She had closed it. And the agency also corrected early misinformation that the school police shot at Ramos before he entered the school. No police officers confronted him outside the school. So it's just one lie after another the cops are telling. And if you know anything about police, they lie all the time. I would say about as much as criminals.
I will give you a hug.
There are 2 sides of the same coin. And here's that guy, Steve McCraw.
Suspected of where we knew the shooter entered, Ramos. was propped open by a teacher. 11:28.
Not true. Throwing a teacher under the bus. Don't you have a cowboy hat festival to get to? Today we learned Uvalde police had a tool to open classroom doors but never tried to use it. And this still isn't the worst of it. Release the body cam footage. Here is JF's Jesus effing C. No wonder Uvalde police are using taxpayer money to hire lawyers to keep their records under lock. Surveillance shows police never even tried to open the doors of the classroom where the killer holed himself up with kids and teachers. What a bunch of lying chicken shit cowards. There's one more. It's from a blue check. The Uvalde police chief told the Texas Tribune that he was ready to die for those kids. He just needed a key. Now the Express News is reporting that he never even tried to open the doors and that they may have been unlocked the whole time.
Wow. And he didn't even need a key. They had now we know that they had the mechanism that could have opened it up the
they had
whole
the
time.
crowbar. They had the crowbar thing, that special crowbar. Was it called a
I've
Haglin?
lost track of how many times they've changed their stories. It's incredible.
It's like they're the Joe Biden of police forces.
I was just gonna say it sounds like the Joe Biden college record.
Yeah. So if you think you couldn't hate the cops in Uvalde more, you were wrong. And by the way, again, this is about police culture. And the police culture nowadays is police, they think their number one job is to make sure they get home safe at night. That's not their job. Their job was to make sure those kids got home safe. And it means risking your life. And if you don't want to do that, then why don't you go do another job? Because policing isn't for you. If you're a coward, if your safety is your number one concern, that's not a cop. That's called a comedian. You're a regular person. That's what I do. Okay, over to Steph.
All right. Thank you, Jimmy. In Krista's defense, she did push back on the Russiagate issue, but Bill's show is designed to not be able to delve into these issues, so I think she was stymied. Thank you, Pablo Diablo. Woke up this morning thinking about Kerp randomly. Sonic's infected ear. All right. I'm going to read this unvaccinated guy. I hope I don't regret it. When Jim Jam's been a good boy, the fruit punch lipstick comes out and Steph does XXX drunk Pelosi impersonation. Not so bad, unvaccinated guy.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Dorr.
Hey, guess what? The Ukraine war is actually hurting us and not Russia. I know it sounds like a broken record, but get this. Corporate self-sanctioning of Russia has U.S. fearing economic blowback. What do you mean? What does that mean, self-sanctioning? Well, Russia's invasion of Ukraine galvanized the United States, the UK, and European Union to unleash a slew of sanctions meant to punish Vladimir Putin's government and pressure him to pull his forces back. But some Biden administration officials are now privately expressing concern that rather than dissuading the Kremlin as intended, the penalties are instead exacerbating inflation, worsening food insecurity, and punishing ordinary Russians more than Putin and his allies. Whoopsie daisy. Officials were initially impressed by the willingness of companies from BP to McDonald's Corp to abruptly self-sanction, sometimes selling assets at fire sale prices. But the administration was caught off guard by the potential knock-on effects from supply chain bottlenecks to uninsurable grain exports due to the company's decisions to leave. So when the companies decided to amscray, it actually screwed everything up. It didn't actually just hurt Putin, Russia, whatever. It screwed up supply chains and all kind of things, right? In an acknowledgement of that concern on May 25th, the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, why don't you OFAC yourself, which oversees sanction regimes, they extended a general license so that companies could continue to pay taxes fees and import duties related to doing business in Russia until September 30th.
The enemy is doing bad things to our core. We no
So
longer have a fort there.
this is this is all symbolism in pursuit of more energy sales to Europe for American companies. The message was clear. Doing business in Russia is allowed, provided companies aren't working with sanctioned entities. The concessions and adjustments highlight the difficulties involved in sanctioning the world's 11th largest economy. Previous sanctions campaigns against countries such as Iran and North Korea sought to impose a similar level of isolation on much smaller economies. Russia's ties to the global commodities market, particularly energy and grains, has made this much more complicated. There's no sign that administration officials feel their sanctions policy was a mistake, or they want to dial back the pressure. If anything, officials have said a key U.S. goal is to ensure Russia can't do to other nations what it has done to Ukraine. But the collateral damage from the sanctions has been wider than expected. This is in Bloomberg.
Bloomberg's been pretty good about covering this stuff.
That's wild, right? When the invasion began, the Biden administration believed that if penalties exempted food and energy, the impact on inflation at home would be minimal. Since then, energy and food have become key drivers of the highest U.S. inflation rates in 40 years. A huge political liability for President Joe Biden and the Democratic Party heading into November's midterm, I'll say. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has said that she was wrong in believing last year that inflationary pressures would pass. So while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged U.S. businesses to cease operations in Russia, telling a joint Russian and session of Congress that the Russian market was flooded with our blood, the Biden administration has been encouraging some commerce, including for agriculture, medicine, and telecommunications. If regular people knew this, what do you think their response would be? Wait a minute, you're making me pay $9 a gallon for fucking gas,